everything changed in that moment. Like I lost my house and my wife and my car and my kids, and everything kind of went crazy. And I went down a pretty nasty, addictive rabbit hole and ended up in rehab. 10 years later. But people pleasers tend to give their power away in the name of making other people happy, i.e., they make other people happy by making themselves into something they don't like.
Nick, welcome to the World XP podcast. How are you today?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So why don't you do a quick intro, kind of who you are and what you do for the people listening. And then as for those who have listened before, we'll get into the question from the last guest, and then hopefully that'll be a good segue right into the conversation.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I am, I guess the term is a social media influencer. I don't even know if influencer is the word anymore. I'm a
I don't
social.
know.
I have a presence on social media, known as the People Displeaser, and I work with people all over the world. Both CEOs and executives and private equities, really kind of on a broad scope, helping people overcome this idea that they have to make everyone happy in order to live a fulfilling life. And I started my company and my channels back in 2021, and it's been a real wild ride.
Yeah. So another COVID business, baby.
Yep.
A lot of those are around for sure. So the question from the last guest, I'll open it up slightly. I'll say if you had to be if you had to be a car, what would you be and why? She asked specifically sports car, but if you don't have one, we can go for car.
I had to be a car. What would I be and why? Let's see. I think I would be a 1962 Chevy Chevelle.
Hmm. Antique. Nice.
Yeah, antique, functionally very strong, um, looks nice when it's done right, and just real cool.
Yeah, well, I mean that's kind of the area of American muscle cars, right? The '67, like think Camaro, I think it was, and all these
Mhm.
other ones, and then like those are the ones that are very much sought after. If you're watching like Pawn Stars or one of these
Sure.
other things, like those are always the ones that people want. Or like who's it? Jay Leno, I think, has got his giant car collection full of
Yep,
old ones from
something
that
like
time.
200
Yeah.
cars or something crazy.
Wow, I mean that's a different. I mean I don't even know. I guess if you have that much money and you want to collect things, like sure, fair enough.
Sure.
Um, Okay, so I guess I want to start a little bit further back in your life because I think a lot of people struggle with the boundary setting, the people pleasing, and it's not just even, I think a lot of people my age struggle with it, or at least friends that I know struggle with it in work
Sure.
and relationships, like online dating and things like that. They're like, well, if I don't make this person happy, then they'll just swipe to the next person, or I'll never get the raise, or any of these things. But not everyone takes that, overcomes something, and then is like, you know what, I'm going to help everybody else do that. So did you have like a particular like is this well, I guess so there's two questions baked in. One, did you always have the entrepreneurial like spirit? But two, did you have a specific like a very serious or maybe life changing or profound version of this that made you want to jump into this as a business?
So, to answer your first question, have I always had the entrepreneurial spirit? I think so. I started my first company at the ripe old age of like 9 years old, washing cars in my neighborhood, and I've always kind of made my own way and my own money, and I've always worked. I really had my first job when I was 13, so I've always had kind of the ability to go out and create something from nothing, which has been kind of it's been a really cool part of being me. Um, to the second question, did I have kind of a profound moment? I actually had a couple. In 2009, we had some pretty awful experiences with my father. He turned out to be not who I thought he was. And the result of that was kind of an implosion of my life. So,
Mm,
everything changed in that moment. Like I lost my house and my wife and my car and my kids, and everything kind of went crazy. And I went down a pretty nasty addictive loophole, or rabbit hole rather, and ended up in rehab 10 years later. But that was really the beginning, and I think it was in that moment that I had the realization that I didn't know who I was. And, for years I'd been struggling in corporate America. And by years, I mean 10 years. I've been in sales and corporate stuff and trying to build this life that looked more like his than mine. And in that moment, I think what happened was I realized I had a framework for life that wasn't designed by me. And I didn't really know at 29 years old how to deal with that. And so, um, in my vast maturity, I just kind of blew my life up. And, uh, you know, without this going on into a sad story, I think it's worth noting that, um, who I am today was a result of those moments. And then you fast forward, I had another marriage and that dissolved. And it was really right after my father died in 2016, I think it was, that those wounds kind of got ripped open again. And that's kind of part of what I think when you're overcoming hardships from the past, they tend to come back more than once to kind of to get dealt with. And that was another one of those moments where it happened. And I really, really, steered into addiction and heavy drinking and alcoholism and all the things. And that landed me in rehab in 2018. I don't think rehab changed a lot for me. It was a very safe place to be sober,
Mm.
and the food was decent. But the rehabilitation centers in the United States specifically are not known for being highly effective. And so, most people relapse within the first 90 days. And, you're talking about 3% success rate, plus or minus. And so I don't think I really leaned on that as a defining moment so much as a safe moment. Um, and at that point, I had to bankrupt my company, and I was living in my mom's basement, and I was $70,000 in debt. So I had to bankrupt myself. And, the list is kind of endless of the maladies that I experienced in that timeline. Met a girl, of course, which is what you do in your first year of recovery. And, then that turns into a disaster, which is also pretty normal. And that lasted until about 2021. Um, when the real shift happened. So she and I broke it up early January. So around, actually, it was January 5th that she and I broke up. And then on January 6th, we had the insurrection problem. Um, that's why I remember the date anyway. And so the the world kind of came crashing down on me. She and I had built this RV together, like a motorhome, and we were going to
Hmm.
travel the country. And she called me and accused me of all kinds of things, one of which I did, most of which I hadn't. And the result was she left and she took my dog and she took the car and like she left my RV in Arizona, and I had to fly back and go get it by myself. And it was really not fun.
Yeah, I
Um,
can imagine that's not a fun
yeah,
drive back
no,
to
it
wherever.
it sucked. And at that point, I really wanted to live in California most of my adult life. I grew up there, and I'd been trying. Every time something bad would happen, I would end up in Huntington Beach, California, and this was no different. So I just got my RV and drove to Huntington Beach, and ended up staying at an Airbnb for about 3 months. And I parked my RV in this lot down in Orange, California, and it was fine and it was cheap, and that was all working. And um, it was there. It was there that it occurred to me. So I'd been sober for 3 months, roughly. It was March 12th. I remember because I was 90 days sober, or no, 60 days sober. I don't know. I've been sober a minute, and um, I was writing letters to myself, or I had been for the last couple of days, and really just kind of going through the catharsis of figuring out who I am and who I wanted to be. And it occurred to me again. It was like, I said it out loud. I'm like, damn, I've never done anything for myself. I've never just thrown myself into what it means to be me. And it's a heartbreaking moment when you realize that. You have this sinking feeling of like, oh God, this is what I built, right? And that kind of led to another moment of like, is this all there is? And then I was like, this can't be all there is. And the year previous, like right as COVID was starting to kick off, I had booked a trip to Costa Rica, and they had closed it. Excuse me, it's been a long day.
No,
They had
no
closed it.
worries.
They had closed Costa Rica, so I couldn't go there. And not to mention, my ex had bumped up against we'll call it a relapse at the time, and so her probation wouldn't allow her to leave the country, and so there's kind of a lot at play. And so I was sitting in this Airbnb, and I booked myself a trip to Costa Rica for my 31st birthday. I was going to leave on April 4th, and I'd be there after my birthday and then some. And I was just going to hang out for a couple of weeks and kind of see what traveling the world was. Traveling by myself was all about. Well, I went, um, and I stayed for 2 weeks, and then I went to a different part of Costa Rica, and I stayed for like 3 days. And my now fiance had joined me at the time, and I looked at her and I said, "I don't want to go back yet." And she's like, "I don't either." And I was like, "Well, let's not." So, so we didn't. And so we went and we flew back for about 2 days. We packed all of our stuff into a storage unit, and then we flew to Mexico, and we didn't turn around for 2.5 years. And it was through that journey that I really started to recognize who I am, and my love of adventure, and my desire to see the world, and see life in a bigger way, to zoom out really
Hmm.
from my own problems, and to really embrace what this existence is supposed to be. And I think that's when the people displeaser was born, right? Is in that moment is like, okay, well, if I'm going to do me, um, that means that I have to stop um, making other people feel better at the cost of hating myself. And I'd been a coach before. I've owned a coaching company before this one, and I've been a coach. I've trained coach for 15 years now. And I remembered at that time, I was like, man, I really loved working with people. I loved helping people, get where they wanted to go. And I was like, oh, this is probably the time. Like, it's the time. It's cheap to live in South and Central America. I can survive on what I've got in the bank. Wasn't very much, and so that's how this was started.
When, well, I guess we could say the world came crashing down on you more than once, but
Yep, it does that from time to time.
I, yeah, and I think as it does everybody in their own way. What sort of, I guess I'll say it like this, but there's more kind of there's a lot of thoughts that I've got swirling around, but in terms of like what happened, so in my head, I would say, okay, it happened once, and now I've got maybe I can do some things to avoid it, but also I'm blessed enough in my life to have a support system that maybe would not let that occur. So,
Sure.
in terms of you, if you had to talk to that version of you, like what sorts of things would you say to that version of you? Because regardless of what the situation is, whether it's your dad or the bankruptcy or the money or any of these things, right? Like
Sure.
everything that you've built is now just like toast and gone, and you can have feelings of like, did I waste all my time? Where did I go wrong? And you can really go down a spiral, which you did.
Mhm.
How do you like what would you say to that version of you then, if you were that support system?
You're fine.
Hmm.
Um, Not that you will be fine, but you are fine. I think I got really tired at that point of hearing people tell me it was going to be okay. Because you can't, when you're in the throes of that kind of pain, you can't really believe that. And one of the things I just wanted somebody to say to me was, "You're okay. You're gonna be okay." Like, is not good. Like, you're okay. You are okay. And I think too many of us spend a disproportionate amount of time focusing on what could be rather than what is. And that would be my answer would be, hey man, you're okay.
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot of what ifs that goes around in people's brains, and what if can destroy you if you're not like it's okay once in a while to say like as a lesson learned, next time I change and I do it this
Sure.
way instead. But dwelling on that, I think, n well, I don't want to say never, but almost never leads to anything productive.
No.
Um, and
A question
and
I've learned something in that regard in the
right.
last 5 years, which is I never try to get into what I should have done. I only get into preference.
Hmm.
So if you think back on experiences you had, or maybe mistakes that you've made, rather than I should have done it this way, we tend to mythologize our past, right? And what I mean by that is we say, if I'd done it this way, this would have been the result. Well, you can't predict that either.
Right.
So this kind of past mythology is what the should words bring out in that. So what I've done is reprogram that more toward preference, which is like, what would I prefer to do next time?
Yes,
And
I like that.
and it works much better, and it gives you a sense of agency rather than helplessness.
Yeah. No, I like how that message is packaged. And I think the other thing is um I think there's a saying it's like the broken egg cannot be mended. It's like, okay, well what do you do about it now? Like it's
Right.
happened and now you move on. And that happens at least for me when I'm coaching athletes. That's one of the biggest we call goldfish brain. It's like you made a mistake, next play, move on.
Sure.
And I think I don't know if you played sports, we didn't talk about this, but at least athletics has helped me lots with that in life where
Yeah.
like over the course of a game I'm going to make however many mistakes I'm going to make and it's in a constrained time and then the whistle
Right.
is done and the game's over and we all move on and then we have to think if it's an important game you think about it for a couple days be like right and then you still have to move on because there's next season and if you
Right.
dwell on it the worse you get and then it's the same but you've got teammates to kind of help you out of it
Right.
um, in terms of the message, kind of, okay, so you get to Costa Rica, the idea for the people displeaser is kind of born. Where where did it take form into what it is, right? If you scroll, like if I scrolled down your Instagram this morning, and it's just reels with what seems like to me, and that's why I said the word seems. I want to emphasize that, like relatively simple messages and simple things to do, but they're not that simple, and it's also not that simple to package it in the way that you've packaged it, as evidenced by your I would prefer to have done this versus I should have. So,
Sure.
like you're in Costa Rica, you want to start coaching again because that's what you liked. What's the thought process? You're like, I'm not in the States. Maybe I do a business or an Instagram, but like, where's the practical fruition of the thoughts? Like, what's the thought process for that?
Well, so in Costa Rica is when it occurred to me that I wanted to coach.
Okay,
I didn't really do anything about it until I got to Panama, which would have been in July
okay,
of 21. And I took a like course, like launch your coaching company in 6 weeks or less, or some craziness,
okay,
by a guy named Preston Smiles. Um, one of the worst courses I've ever taken in my life. In fact, it's kind of given way to my not wanting to teach online courses at all. Um, and if you're listening, most of the time online courses don't work. So I'll explain more about that later. But the the people displeaser was born out of angst. I was irritated
mm,
at myself, and I just started talking to myself. Like that's one of the little known things about creating on Instagram, especially if you're me, is that I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to me. Um, and I'm coaching myself through the problems I'm having in the moment, whether it be people pleasing or imposter syndrome, or name a syndrome or itis, and I probably have coached myself through it. And and that's really what it was. Is I was dealing with a really high level of problem of like I make everybody happy and I don't do anything for myself. Um, and even now when I say it, there's like a little bit of me that still says it like a child, like I don't do anything for myself. Um, and that's I started to pay attention to that and really speak into that. And the results were resounding. I mean, it was unbelievable, the growth and what's happened. And I think to answer your question, it was like it wasn't really born, it was invented. Um, and it was invented out of necessity, because I needed and I really wanted to help other people deal with it while I dealt with it.
So where did this the people pleasing do you think come from? Because if you're starting a car washing thing when you're 9 and you're kind of doing stuff on your own, you would think, at least my thought is, well, he wants to do what he wants to do his own business. He wants to make his own money, and he's doing these
Sure,
things. And so you would think it would weed its way into other aspects of your life, right? When you're 10 and you got to go talk to an adult and say, "Hey, I want to wash your car for $5 or whatever it is." Like
sure,
this is a real for a lot of kids that do it, and then you like my little brother was doing stuff like that for YouTube. He was like, my parents were like, "Why is he always playing video games?" I'm like, he's not just playing video games. He's emailing the CEO of this video game company when he's 14, and they're giving him free stuff so he can advertise. And it's like, this is good thing. Like he's doing stuff and he's becoming confident and
right.
doing things for himself. And so you would, my thought would be, it would weed into the rest of your. But there was clearly like a compartmentalization for you in that way. Can you talk to that a little bit and where? Well, I guess like what the well, I don't know, just that phenomena, I guess, because I don't really know what the question is without making assumptions maybe that I shouldn't make. So I'll leave it there. But what are your
Sure.
thoughts on that?
People pleasing is almost universally an issue of enmeshment trauma. And I hate the word trauma. You probably have seen it on my channel. Like I don't actually believe that trauma exists. I function more in the Adlerian psychology frame, which is that we are not defined by our past, but by what we make of it. And um, so when you look at somebody that's like that, that has, kind of a pleasing tendency very often, especially in men, what you had was a mom that was either overbearing or made you their world, and a dad that was either abusive in my case, or was, kind of despondent or not really present. And what that teaches, a guy is to please the feminine or to make everyone else happy so you are safe. Right. So if I make everybody happy, I won't get hurt. If I shrink myself, I won't be seen, therefore I won't get hurt. If I say yes to everything, then I won't be in trouble, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It kind of goes on and on and on. What happens though is that you end up transferring that belief system, or that mode of living, or story into your adulthood. And the unfortunate news about being a kid is like, we do the best we can. We make a decision that like, okay, I'm going to make everyone happy, so I'm never in danger. Well, that is a decision we made, whether we knew it or not. Our child brain just does the thing. And then, if we keep living like that into adulthood, it ends up sabotaging us and creating kind of this world around us that's no fun to live in. So um, that's how it's created anyway. And in my case, it was identical to that. My mom was very busy. She's a wonderful lady, by the way. Mom, if you're listening, I love you. But my dad was not a good human, and um, it's just part of the story.
Hmm.
It's part of, I think now, and I don't really even talk about it anymore, but now we've kind of idealized trauma. It's almost like it's like a virtue signal now. Like, look how much I've overcome to be this person, and like, sure, I've overcome some things. But a lot of it has just been kind of effort and grit, um, and going on podcasts and talking to people and trying to be real with what is life really about.
So when I guess did did you have kind of from doing car washes and whatever else into corporate life, was that a function of like my parents won't like if I go this way? And then you
No,
just found or like so I guess like when did you was the realization did you have any inklings of it like before um
ooh, good question.
yeah.
Yes, I did, but I don't know that I knew that I did.
Hmm.
right? Like I knew that I was doing really well. Like I was a 27-year-old kid. I had I don't mean that if you're a kid, you're 27, but if you are, you're a fucking kid. So I was a 27-year-old guy, and I had a small family, and I had a pretty nice house and cool cars, and I was making a good living, and I was climbing the ladder of corporate America just like my dad did, you know. And I always wanted to do something else. I always wanted to be my own boss. I always wanted to make my own money, and I couldn't ever figure out why, like, or how. And and it was driving me crazy. I mean, I would cry at night, like I don't like who I am right now. Um, and so in '09, when that all kind of fell apart, I really started to lean toward that. Like, what do I actually want to do? What does it look like if I do this? I love my kids now, but I didn't want children. I didn't want to do that, and I did it anyway because that's what I was supposed to do as a good Christian boy. And I didn't want to be in corporate America, but that's what I was supposed to do if I was going to be a provider. And taking risk is scary if and all those kind of narratives that you hear from people that are don't possess the aptitude or fortitude to go out and do entrepreneurship. And I think there's also a component of entrepreneurship is what I choose to do because I can't do anything else.
Hmm.
um, I'm not good at working for people. I'm terrible with authority. Um, and um, I like doing it my way. So, you know, being successful in this regard, I would rather make 50 grand a year working for myself than make 500 working in a company,
Yeah.
because of the freedom and joy of it.
Talk talk to that a little bit for people who are the ripe kid age of 27 who are
Sure.
kind of in corporate America. They think they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, but they're grinding and they're not super happy. And
Sure.
like talk to that for in terms of finding your kind of what you want to be doing. But then I think the important part is actually making the leap and then actually doing it, right? You can think about it all the time and then, but actually figuring out how to do it and making the leap and having the kind of the courage to do it. And then in terms of risk taking, it is a risk, of course, but there's things that you can do to mitigate that risk, get your ducks in a row, et cetera, et cetera. But like
Sure.
talk to like if you were going to talk to that version of you as well.
Um, Most people at your age or that age, um, this is going to sound terrible, but you don't deserve happiness yet.
Mm. What go through that. What do you mean by
You
that?
you purely haven't earned it. And here's the thing, like, so the way I see life is very different than I think a lot of people. Maybe it's not. Maybe that's me being, generous with my own wisdom. But the from 18 to 27, you're a fucking idiot.
Generally, yeah.
And
I would agree with that.
and I know because from 18 to 27, I was a fucking idiot. I didn't just show up on the earth wise. I had to go through some stuff.
Hmm.
And so if you're in a job and you're young, you're 22 to 27, and you're just out of college and you're doing the thing, 99% of the people that think they're going to start a company and that actually do it fail, and then they end
Yeah.
up going back to what you're doing. So there's value in learning this, but in your 20s you should be focused more on learning than earning anyway. And also you should be fucking around. I think we've encouraged too many generations to grow up too quickly. um I just spoke with a young guy who's like, well, I'm trying to figure out what to do with my life, but I really only want to do is go get this enduro bike and drive from Central America to Argentina. I'm like, do that. Um, because uh, you're not going to feel like it when you're my age. And and I can attest to that too. Being at 40, I took my gap year for God's sake, and by the time I got back, 43, and I was exhausted. I was absolutely physically worn out. And then I tried to do it again, and I'm like, nope, nope, I'm going back home. Um, so exponential growth in your late teens and early 20s, kind of even into the kind of the mid to end of your 20s, happens through experience, not through money for most people. And I think we've got a generation that's focused on being the next billionaire because we're worshiping in the altars of Alex Hormozy and David Goggins and Elon Musk, and these outliers that are. Listen, Alex Hormozy is a great dude, but he's out of his mind. Um,
Mhm.
and Goggins is worse. And like there's these, Gary V is a maniac, right? And
You could
and
sell everything in your house for two
right,
pennies.
right. So you could sell everything in your house for $2 and then you'd be a billionaire. No, fuck off, Gary. But the I think the narrative around being young needs to change because money is easier to come by than it's ever been in human history. It
Hmm.
really is, and you need to understand the value of what it takes to actually survive and aim at that number and have as much fucking fun as you can because that's where you're going to meet the right woman. That's where you're going to meet the right man. That's where you're going to have make the new friends is like in a bowling league on a Sunday night when when the lights are turned down and it's everything's neon and people are high on mushrooms. Like that's the kind of places that you go to meet and develop camaraderie. And I'm not saying go out and be a drug addict, but at the same time, I think there's value in going out and having some beers with your buddies and having a laugh and cutting it up and calling each other pieces of shit and like that's the fun part of life. And I think um all too often we're seeing now people of these younger generations that are like stuck on, if I don't make the right decision, I'm not going to make any. And so we've got to you got guys like your age that are just kind of empirically stuck.
Yeah.
um and it seems like forever stuck, and they don't want to grow up, they don't want to challenge the norms, and they're not incentivized to do it either. You know, um, so I think that's a huge problem. I think we need to incentivize our young people to be happier, um, and not in the sense that like life is awesome and contentment, but to embrace the idea that like adventure is kind of important
Hmm.
and go have some, right?
Yeah.
I tell my kids all the time, I would love it if you'd go out and get in some trouble. That'd be awesome. Like by the time I was your age, the cops had been to my house twice. Um, and but I'm Gen X. I'm out of my mind. So um, and I think there's something to that. I really do. I think we've created a society that's afraid of risk and is
Yes.
afraid to take chances. And if you're 27 and you're listening, or you're 25 and you're thinking I'm miserable, yeah, probably. You know, yeah,
Yeah.
probably. Um, and and you will be until you start making money. And you're probably, even if you're a wonderkin, you're probably 2, 3 years off of that, and your life is longer than you think. It's also shorter than you think. So be careful with your time.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of things that go into the risk taking or lack thereof. I think one of those things is at least people that I talk to are like, well, I'm never going to be able to buy a house unless I get every decision right. And so like
Right,
there's part of that. And then on the flip side of that, it's I'm never going to be able to buy a house, so why do I need to put anything into my 401k or do anything like that the finance people would say that that's a good idea. And you get
right.
kind of and I think somewhere in the happy medium of that still can exist. It's just but it is tough. I think I don't know that many people that have been able to buy houses or are even like looking at like they're like just not gonna happen. And
Sure.
I think like that's not great either. But I think to your point is there's lots of tons of, at least where what I'm used to, there's tons of this is the expected path that you go on,
Mhm.
and this is how you're supposed to do things. And when you get out of that or go against that, oftentimes, depending on the situation, there's a lot of backlash that happens, and it can be quite vicious and difficult to deal with. Um, like, how would you advise somebody to deal with that sort of scenario where it's like you know that if you take this risk, everybody's going to tell you it's not going to work, you shouldn't do it, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, maybe you'll probably fail, right? And entrepreneurs fail all the time, most of the time. But like you learn something then, and it's, in my opinion, better to learn something when you don't have kids and have less responsibilities. You might as well try it then than than later. Like how would you advise somebody to kind of handle that sort of scenario where it's like they want to do it, they're maybe scared nervous of backlash from friends, family, whatever,
Yeah.
and it goes into exactly what your kind of what your page is about. I'm gonna do this because I think it's the right thing to do, and I'm gonna be the people displeaser. And now, like how would you kind of keeping in that sort of young person vein before we get back to your business and kind of how your journey, how would you advise people to sort through that?
Nobody's ever really afraid of failure. They're afraid of what other people will say when they do it.
Mm,
Because you fail at shit all the time. Like you probably fail to make eggs every day, or there's if you really go through your life and countenance every failure of every day, you fail a lot, right? Like I made eggs this morning. It's a great example. I made eggs this morning. I wanted two eggs over easy. I ended up with them scrambled. Know why? Because I failed to crack them properly. But nobody gives a shit about the cracked egg, right?
yeah.
They because nobody's watching, or maybe it doesn't matter. But when we look at things like life decisions, we say, "Well, can't fail at that." You're not afraid of the feeling. You're not afraid of failing. You're afraid of the feeling you'll get when other people see it. And so, you're going to screw up the eggs. You know, the first pancake is always yours because you're going to screw that one up. And so, just get used to it. Like I know I mean that sounds easier than it is, but it's true. It's like I've had six careers in 45 years. I was a mortgage banker in 2008. Lost everything right as my life imploded with my dad too. Like everything, like literally everything in my life fell apart. Um, but if you really ask yourself, like, if you look at where you are today, how long would it take you to get back to this place? And the answer is usually 3 to 6 months, right? You can come back to your own misery in 3 to 6 months if you like. It'll always be here. And um, so I think that's what I would say is I hate the narrative like, well, you're going to fail forward and all that stuff. 'Cause it doesn't feel good. Like it never feels good to fail. Um, but and everything's a lesson, and it's kind of all the jerk off things we say in social media. It's like your failures are your lessons, and you can't fail, you can't succeed without failure. But realistically, like life is fucking hard, man. Like it's gonna hurt. Like life hurts. It's trying to kill you. Like it's been trying to kill you since you were born. Your life's been trying to kill you. So if you and it's gonna. That's the other thing is it's gonna kill you. Like life is going to kill you, and so you may as well go out with a bang. If don't go out. Don't lay on your bed. 60 years from now, hopefully, if you're 27 and say, I really wish I had started that company selling fucking euros in the park or whatever it is you want to do. Um, and and with that regret.
Mm.
Um,
Do you
yeah,
think is there I don't I'm just asking out of curiosity because you have a very like the view that you have on things is obviously shaped by your experiences. Do you
sure.
ever wonder if you've overcorrected for so long in life doing it one way and then having everything crash down on you? Do you ever think like like I'm coaching myself all these things, but maybe I've overcorrected at all in terms of like I don't know. Well, I guess I'll just leave it at that. And I'm not sure if you have or not. It's just something that sometimes that happens where people learn a lesson and they learn too much
Sure.
of the lesson.
I see it a lot in coaching clients actually. So I recently did an in-person 2 day or 2.5 day workshop, and one of the guys called me. He's like, "Dude, my life's fucked up." I'm like, "What happened?" He goes, "Well, I came home and I set boundaries with everybody." I went, "Yeah, that's a problem." So like, probably should have shot me. You should have shot me a text message first. Like that's all I'm saying is, maybe all the boundaries at once was not a good plan. Because he's like, everybody's mad at me, and I'm like, yeah, of course they are. They don't know what to expect. You didn't give me any warning, and there's ways to do that. But um, in my own case, I think probably initially I had
Mm,
overcorrected a bit, and I think that's pretty normal. But if you look at there's a really wonderful book called Psycho Cybernetics. It was written by a guy named Maxwell Maltz. You're a coach, so you're a fitness, or not a fitness, but a sports coach. So it's actually a really valuable tool for you. Um, but he talks about the idea that humans are not actually that we're more like servo mechanisms than we are um, like mammals, in that we course correct toward our belief system. So if you think of what a servo mechanism is, or like a guided missiles aren't actually aimed at the target, they're aimed away from what is not the target. So if you look at them in the sky, they fly like this,
yeah.
right? So any correction is better than no correction. And I think as long as you're willing to accept that you're going to have to correct a course a few times, um, then you're probably going to be okay.
Yeah. Because
Whether
what you
you
could
overcorrect or whether you don't.
Yeah, you get guys like I think Jordan Peterson, like when he first kind of came to prominence, was when he was like, well, you have to start aiming somewhere, and then if you figure out that you don't like it, then you can adjust a little bit, and then you can adjust
Sure.
again, and then eventually you'll kind of figure it out. Um, Okay, so back to Panama is where things started
Hmm.
to. Okay, so you've taken the world's best slash worst online class about
Yep.
how to do a coaching business, and then what? You're like, okay, I'm gonna start making Instagram videos.
That's what it was. That's really what it was. That was their suggestion for how to start a coaching business. Turns out they were right, in that regard anyway. And so I did. I started making coaching videos, and they were terrible. If you one of these days, I swear to God, one of these podcasters, you guys are going to bring on one of these videos and go, "What the hell were you thinking here?" Because I would love for somebody to scroll back to the beginning and just click one. They were terrible.
You know what? I might
Um,
overlay that just because you said it
right,
now.
right. It was like just the one of the series I did was called "Just the Tip" with Coach Nick.
Okay.
I was trying my my very best to be inflammatory, um, and so that was really an exercise in finding my voice. Like, this, you've done 250 podcasts. You get better at this as you go along. And
Yeah.
I'm even in that now, frankly. I don't like my content anymore. Um, I want to do something else. And I think, um, and this is where one of those things is like fear will constantly come up. It's going to continue to plague you, whether you like it or not, whether you control it or not. And so as I sit, the last few days, examining the content that I really like, guys like Jefferson Fisher and, Jimmy on relationships and Mark Manson. And, I've been on Chris Williamson. I love his stuff, but he's not really a creator. He's more of a podcaster.
Hmm.
Um, but as I look at the more teaching type style of content, I wonder how I do that in the way that I do that, which is, kind of funny and irreverent and, in your face, and, because I don't want to be Jimmy. I love Jimmy. He's a really nice dude. I've talked to him a million times. Um, but his approach is so soft, and it's like nice. And, here's how you do that. And, Jefferson Fisher's like, and that wouldn't teach you how to stop people pleasing. And they're like, I'm like, I fucking do things. And so I think the natural progression of life is that it's always evolving. And since nothing is static, change is inevitable, and you have to be willing to accept that. You can't have it the same way forever. And if you could, you'd hate it.
Yeah. You get bored. Well, I would
Yeah.
anyways.
Yeah.
Um, so okay, so how about what was your timeline in terms of when, like, did you have moments where you're like, okay, what am I doing here? Or did you give yourself like, I'm gonna try this for a year, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work? Or like, how quickly did things start to take off for you? And then were you noticing things were working and not working? And because like for me, I this is kind of a passion project, right? Is not what I do full time. And so I post
Yeah.
reels and some of them do well and some of them don't. And I'm like, oh, that makes no sense. And then I move on with my life, right? But for
Sure.
you, like where along the line did this work like talk through kind of the beginning sorts of processes to where you are now? Because I think it was almost half a million followers is nothing to kind of sneeze at there. And so of it
Sure.
like and then kind of baked into that as well, when you started getting up to these numbers, did things start to change for you in terms of people reaching out? Did you ever have to, um, like where you're like, okay, I need to hire somebody to help me, right? I spoke with Valerie. She's very nice. Set the whole thing up. Like, how did your kind of trajectory take you, and some of your thoughts along the way?
I was terrified every day until 2022. Every day. It was miserable. Um, and I had a little money. I was doing okay, and COVID was still paying my unemployment. I was trying, right? I'm making content, trying. Um, but so I started in July of 21 making content. It was terrible, July, August, September. And then I met a guy named Stone Frederickson who taught me how to make TikToks better. And that's when the shift happened, like just kind of a better format for me. And then from that, um, it took another 3 months of 3 videos a day. So I'd made nearly 300 videos by the time I went viral the first time. Um, and man, it was tough. That was a tough period. We were running out of money. So I got my first 3 clients in December of 2021. And then it just has kind of built ever since. Um, and we do well. So it's a journey, man. Like and listen, entrepreneurship's still scary. Like right now, I don't have many applications to work with me, and that's okay. Scary. My Instagram following isn't growing as fast as I'd like. Scary. Um, I'm trying to launch a new version of my company. Scary. Like everything is scary when you're an entrepreneur. And so I think if I like to say that courage and fear cannot exist without one another, right? If you're afraid, that's good. That means you're doing something
Hmm.
right. And courage, and they won't call you courageous or brave until it's over. So just, buckle up and hang on.
Yeah, yeah. Um, did you, as you're making that first kind of 6 months and things are not going so hot, how often, like for people listening, because I've gone through similar, how often are you
So
like, what am I even doing? I watched my video sucks, nobody watched it. Or,
twice a day?
but by the same token, are you also, right, you mentioned you're coaching yourself. Are these
Mhm.
therapeutic for you at all? So you're kind of like, are you in this weird kind of like balancing act where you're like, okay, I'm coaching myself a little bit, but also like, do I have to upload it because I look like an idiot?
I think in the beginning, yes. I don't know that I'm coaching myself as much now. I think that actually might be part of the problem is that I'm not really talking to myself as much as I used to.
Hmm.
Um, I've been worried more about virality and following or whatever than I have been about the work. I think, and that's a real moment for me that we just had, and and it's something I've been cognizant of, and I've been working toward. Like, hey, let's get back to just having the conversation. Um, yes, you're going to feel weird. And it really doesn't matter what you start. Like I owned a pedal pub. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those. It's like a 10-passenger bicycle with pedals. where you drink on it. It drives around town, and I used to own three of those. And that business was scary too. And the coaching company before this coaching company was scary too. And you know, it's just scary, man. Like life has got some stuff.
Hmm.
And none of it's really scary. Like, there's no grizzly bear chasing me down. It's just my own perception. Um, so when you realize you're actually not afraid, you're more like, what's everybody gonna think? Right? What's this mean about me? It's the bullshit stories we tell ourselves that we're afraid of. It's not the story itself.
Yeah. When you're worried about people, what other people think, there's also a certain level of that I think that's healthy, right? It's like we don't go
Yeah,
outside naked and or we don't do crazy things in public. How so there's a little bit of a balancing act there. Um, and for I guess when you're coaching people, often I would imagine that they come from the side of people pleasing and you're trying to get them to not care as much.
sure,
Um, but how do you package the message of like, because there's certain things that you should care what they think about.
sure.
And then like, do you kind of get down to that level of specificity? Or I mean, I guess it depends on who you're coaching, but I guess in your content and how you think about things.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Hmm. Let me the whole you're the people displeaser. If you
Hmm.
just take that in a vacuum, you're like, I'm just gonna
Sure,
piss people off.
sure.
Right? But also that's not a good recipe for life. And what I'm not trying to what I guess what I'm getting at is like where do you where do you draw the line now having kind of you went through all those things, you're like I need to do stuff for me and not care what other people think. And now you're a few years out now and you can reflect on like what are the like is there a good way if somebody was to ask you like, "Hey Nick, I think I'm doing a pretty good job of not caring what people think, but I'm getting into a little bit of trouble and maybe I shouldn't be whatever." Like
Sure.
I'm getting more towards that. If somebody's like, "Hey man, like how do I balance this? How do I balance this out?" Because it's
You
tough.
don't?
Like you go through life and you're like, this
Sure,
person cares what I'm wearing, and this
sure,
person, but I don't want them to care. But also, like, you kind of have to a little bit, right? You at a wedding, you
sure.
wear a suit.
Sure. So the people displeaser is a funny moniker in that way because I'm actually not real displeasing.
Yeah,
I'm genuinely a pretty nice person. I'm genuinely happy. I make good decisions. I take care of my family. Like I'm really not, all that displeasing. Um, you're never going to not care what people think. You will always care what they. The question isn't whether you care or not. It's whether are you willing to make all of your decisions based on that data. So, you hear it a lot. It's like, yeah, not everybody's going to like you, and that's okay. All right, it's true. Um, but with people pleasers, we or they now, I suppose, um, tend to give their power away in the name of making other people happy, i.e., they make other people happy by by making themselves into something they don't like, right? And I think that's what people displeasing is. It's like I'm not saying you should be, you should displease everyone. What I'm saying is you're going to displease someone, and that's okay. I mean, I did a post the other day. I got absolutely flamed in the comments, but 9,900 people liked it. Which data is more important?
probably
You
the amount
know,
of people that like it, I would say.
right? And what if it was only one person that liked it? Well, that's okay too. because the message isn't for everyone. It's for the person to whom it's going to resonate. And um, so I think that's the weird delineator. Like on a long enough, if you look at people pleasing and being a jerk, they're actually on the same timeline. There's opposite spectrums of a toxic extreme. And so, and they're both based in control. So the answer is you're probably always going to care. It's just you have to learn to make decisions based on, putting yourself as equal to that number.
Hmm.
So boundaries, and I say this, boundaries and becoming less pleasing aren't about, putting yourself first. It's about making yourself equal.
I like that. That's another good way of packaging that. You mentioned something that I was going to ask about, so it's a good segue. If you get flamed in the comments for something, how did that take you a little while to get used to? Right, you've mentioned a couple things that I think people on the internet generally like, okay, well, about trauma or things like that, that
Sure.
if you go on the internet more broadly, that opinion would be not well received. So
Yeah, you might say that.
yeah. So how did it take you a little while to learn to deal with that, or how was your kind of experience with that sort of thing, with a
Still not great
followings?
at it. I'm really still not good at that. I'm still not great at that. One thing I've started doing is when I see somebody that's kind of being inherently jerky, or treating me like I am not valuable or I have no value because they disagree with my assertion. I just post a copy of my bulletproof boundaries free guide in their comment. I use every negative comment now as a marketing opportunity, so please feel free. Um, because look, I'm not going to change somebody's mind if their belief systems are that trauma is the be all end all, and it's stored in the body, and your the fascia in your skin cells, and everything's holding on to it, and you're going to be your trauma forever. Well, fuck, who might argue with you? But it's not it's not comfortable what I say. I think maybe if it was, I'd have a bigger following, but um I'm okay with that. Like I don't. I think there's a misconception about me. I think people think, or I kind of have a sneaking suspicion that people's perception of me is that I try to inflame, and I don't. Um, I'm really only speaking to my experience. So I say it a lot when somebody comments, and they do it in the majority of them. Like not everything's about you. And there is no faster way to get a traumatized person or a victimhood or a victim mentality person to get angry than to tell them they are personally responsible for how their lives turn out.
That's true. That's very true.
and
Um,
and the unfortunate news is you are right at the end of the day. You could have had shitty parents, you could have had a million things go wrong, uh, but you're still responsible.
yeah. How if you're coaching somebody, how do you kind of help them to get there in a way that well, I guess I'll just again, I guess I'll just leave it at that. But that's a big shift, I think. If right, Rogan always says like the best way to have a better country is to have less losers and for people to take responsibility for their actions.
100%.
And like you said, and I think in one of your most recent ones that you posted, it's like, well, that is not the path of least resistance.
Right.
So how do you change somebody's mindset into because on the flip side of that, it's also can be very empowering to actually believe that you are responsible for your own life. There's a lot more
Sure.
responsibility that comes with that, but it can be very empowering as well. So how when you're coaching people, how do you help them make that shift?
um I asked very powerful questions. The world of coaching is wildly misunderstood. My job isn't to steer the ship. It's to ask you how you want to steer the ship. And um, when it's done properly, it can be amazingly powerful. So I don't know if I have an answer for that because I think everybody's really different. Um, but I would say that what I ask is more important than what I ask people in terms of questions is probably the most important thing that I do because I think I think our minds, and maybe I shouldn't speak to the nervous system, but I think our minds at least um, want better always. And so there's also by nature, we try and find motivation for that. And very often that motivation is dislike. It's weird, right? It's like, why do I have to hate where I am to want better? And I don't think that you do. So I think it's more about exposing what's real than it is about how I impact the change. Does
That makes
that make
sense.
sense?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. I think that's a good answer as well. Um, so you mentioned as well two kind of future looking questions. You mentioned that you were looking at kind of changing your content a little
Hmm.
bit. What sorts of things are you looking at? Or like if somebody was to look at your page, they would see one version of content. What are you said you weren't really liking it anymore. So like what sorts of things are you not preferring about it? And then what like where are you kind of aiming at?
I think I'd like to do more teaching than talking. I think I've gotten to that point in my journey where I'd like to be teaching people more, um, and really giving away what I know rather than kind of exposure of what's wrong. Because I think there's some power in that. I think I've got a voice there. Um, I'd like to do more playful kind of skit work content because I'm pretty funny. I'm a decent actor, and I like to do fun things. I think there's two components. Like I'm a little bored with what I'm doing. I think I could get some of that walk and talk video back if I was, or have more fun doing that if I was doing less of it. I mean, I've been doing the same type of video over and over and over again for you know now 5 years or 4 years. So I think in the coming days you'll see a different iteration of the people displeaser.
Good.
Probably still displeasing in many ways, um, but I think probably more toward um, teaching.
Then you also mentioned a relaunch of your company. What so well I guess if there's things that are still under wraps or whatever, of course you don't have to
No, it's
say.
fine.
But
No,
if
I'm happy to do it.
yeah, so we'll talk about that and then I guess if you had a magic wand and could say like next 3 to 5 years, what would it look like for you? Like where are things going? What's the goal or what's your goal? What sorts of things are you passionate about pursuing? Obviously, you mentioned the skit work in the teaching and in the
Sure.
company, but like what sorts of things would be if everything went according to plan, which it never does. But
No.
if it did in the next
Um,
like 3 to 5 years, what are you looking at?
so your first question was about how do I restructure the company?
Hmm.
Um, I heard an interesting line the other day on Chris Williamson, actually. He said that the definition of being a grifter is selling a product that you wouldn't buy yourself.
Yep, I think I heard that as well. He's great, by the
Yeah.
way, Chris
Yeah,
Williamson.
he's incredible. Being on his show was absolutely nuts. It was awesome. Online courses do not work, period. I know it. You know it. Everybody who sells them knows it. And when I heard that line, it occurred to me that the reason that I've had so much trouble launching that kind of product is because I know that. Um, I can't, in good conscience, sell something that I know is ineffective. So as I heard that the other day, and I've been really thinking about this a lot anyway, it occurred to me that really, I mean, this thing I've wanted to do forever is teach small workshops and have big seminars. That's what I want to do. And so I'm going to aim my whole company at that. I'm aiming everything at that over the next 6 months. And my one-on-one coaching clients, which are awesome. I have really cool guys that I work with, and I'm starting a whole new forum for that that's based around CEOs and executives. It's really cool. So I'm excited for that. But I'm not going to do any more online shit with courses. What I am going to do is I'm going to build them and I'm going to record them and I'm going to give them away for free. Because if people need the knowledge and they need the data, then they should be able to do that. But we know there's certain things we know that work. Like we know they work. Books work, and I have a book coming out in 2027. We know that experiences work. We know that seminars work. We know that um, connection works, and we know that one-on-one coaching works. Those we know that work. We
Yeah.
know those work. So I'm only going to focus my energy on things that I know work. And, maybe that means that I do, and I haven't really iterated that quite out yet, but maybe it means that I do a kind of mastermind where I have 25 people and they pay a certain amount a month. And that is the core. That is the monthly recurring revenue that I need or whatever. And maybe that's a part of it. Because I know that those work. But even those don't work if you don't put people in the same room every year,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm really, really tired of online course bros and link in bio brothers doing what they do. And I don't want to be one of those anymore. Um, I've reached a level that I'm like, I'd rather not do this than do that. So that's, I think, what I'm going to try to accomplish in the next 12 months is I'm going to get this company to a place where it's doing what it should be doing, which is helping people. And is that more expensive and it doesn't have, potentially less access? Yeah, probably. Um, probably, but I'll sleep at night. And, I know that some of the things I do are really are powerful. Like my online 5-day challenge is really a good one. It's great. It's a really good program. I don't charge for it. Um, I don't need to. And, I don't want to. So, and to your next question, it's like in the next 3 to 5 years, what does it look like? It looks like me doing 3 seminars a year, 4 workshops a year, and taking 20 new clients. And, the revenue target's the revenue target. But um, I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
That's what I want. Yeah. Like I don't want to, you know, I don't want to do it the way other people are doing it. Well, I'll teach you how to make $1 million in 7 days or less. And, like, but you got to pay me $100 to find out. Then they're like, how I made $1 million was telling you how to make $1 million. Like, I don't want to be that guy. Right. Um, and so I think I'm going to rebel against the coaching industry. I am going to disrupt the market. I am going to say, and it's not new, it's going backward, is to say you know better. It's really challenging the coaching narratives. Like you fucking know better. You know this doesn't work. I know because I've taken 100 courses online and they never work because nobody's holding you accountable. There's no reason that they would work. They I belched out a bunch of content and I'm going to charge you, $190 for it. And it feels like shit, so I'm just not going to do it anymore. And if that means I only coach one-on-one for the rest of my career, then fine. I don't have any problem with that. But I don't think that'll be the case. What I think will happen is people are going to respect that I give away all the data for free. I give away everything for free. And if you want me to help you implement it, I do that in person.
I want people listening, I want you guys listening to understand like what he just said, what you just said, Nick, is like you're a person at peace with kind of who you are and what your principles are. And that is like it just even though we're not even in person, it's still like was there. Um, so Well, one, I wish you all the best with doing that because I'm sure you'll get some pushback, of course, as we just talked about before. Um, what sorts of like going on Chris Williamson and some of these other big podcasts, like what is that like for people that don't know or people maybe who've watched Chris Williamson's show before, like or watched some of the big podcasts, like what is it what's it like to go on one of those?
Hmm. Man, it was neat. I hope he lets me come back on someday. I'm sure he will. He's a really cool guy. Um, I've gotten to go on some big ones too. Williamson was the biggest. Um, Humbling, I think, is a good word. I didn't expect to get on his show. I was grateful for that chance. And what had happened was I just commented on a post he had put up about him being a people pleaser, and I was like, "Yeah, I don't experience you that way. And here's kind of what I see in that vein." And he was like, "You should come on the show." And I was like, "You got to be fucking kidding me." Um, so um, so I did, and um, I don't know. What's it feel like? It feels cool. Um, I don't think that I'm real famous yet, but and I don't, and I've never set out to be that. I think it will probably happen just by, you know, I guess by virtue of my character, not because I'm so cool, but because I just kind of keep doing the thing, and it just kind of keeps growing on me.
I don't know,
Um,
you're pretty cool.
yeah, I'm a pretty cool guy. So yeah, I think that's my answer. Is it's pretty cool. I think my life is pretty cool. It's hard. Like it's a hard job. Like content creator is a job. I think people don't realize that. Like, it's a fun job, but it's still a job.
Yeah.
Um, and there are days that I don't want to go walk 3.5 miles to record 3 videos, but I do it every day. Did it this morning. Yeah, right now I have to do it at 6 a.m. because it's so damn hot in Denver. I can't get out of my house. Um, and so when you work hard for something and you sacrifice for it, you bleed for it. It hits different. And Williamson was kind of one of those early hits for me. I was really grateful.
Is he as advertised? Is he out off camera the same person?
Same guy.
That's what I would expect
Yeah,
from him.
absolutely, absolutely same guy.
Have you taken a chance to reflect kind of on your journey up to the point that you're at now and be like you just said, kind of when you work for something and it works itself out, you can be like, good job, self, me. Have you had a chance to kind of do that?
No,
Some point you should.
probably. Um, that's about as honest as I've ever been on a podcast. I was honest with Chris Williams, and I'm honest on. There's a moment of honesty on all of these. Somebody asked me a good question like that. I don't think I have. It's one of the more challenging proclivities of being raised the way I was and kind of living that pleaser lifestyle. Is you struggle with um, self advocacy and celebration. It's never enough. And it's part of, it's also the calling card of successful people, which is really unfortunate. Like if you look at Alex Mosey, he talks about this a lot. Like, there are three calling cards of successful people. They have to believe they're not enough. They have to believe they deserve better, and they have to have high level of impulse control. So I have all three of those. Well, the impulse control can be a little challenging for me with the ADHD, but um, it's no, no, I haven't. And maybe someday
You will, I'm
I'll get
sure.
there. Yeah,
Some
I'll get there
somebody
sometime.
somebody will make you do it. They have to. Um, I know you got we got a little bit of time left, but do you have any kind of last Nichols thoughts, things that people should, or actually, let me do this one first. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have?
No, I think you've done a pretty good job. Um, maybe, I think the question I always ask myself is one that I don't know that you would know to ask, which is, what do you view as the meaning of life?
That's a good question. What do you view as that?
Love and adventure. Um, and I've come to say more on that recently, which I think that love and adventure are the meaning of life, but I think honesty is the core source energy of both. And if you want to, really supercharge who you want to be, and you really want to experience love, and you really want to experience the adventure of a lifetime, just be honest. Um, because honesty is the most exposure that you can ever hope for. It's the most you can ever be. And when you stop protecting what's true, um, you start living.
Yeah, yeah. I couldn't agree more. Sometimes too autistically honest. I probably shouldn't say that. That's all right.
That's all right.
Um, Do you have any last thoughts, Nichols, before we get you out of here? Well, I guess if people who are listening to this probably, I would imagine, have know who you are already. But for those who don't,
Sure.
where can the people find you?
Well, you can find me on Instagram or TikTok, or pick a channel. Just look for the People Displeaser. That's easy enough to find. I'm on. It's all the same on all of them, except for TikTok. I think I'm People Displeaser on TikTok. Um, and if you want to talk to me, just go to nickpollard.com, and I'm easy enough to find. And just Google me. I'm not hard.
Yeah.
I'm the first guy that pops up when you put in my name. Um, which is pretty funny because there's some pretty prominent doctors who have done some really cool shit that I now outrun. Kind of cracks me up. Um, so yeah, that's the easiest place to find me. As far as final nuggets of wisdom, um, you're not stop thinking that your past defines who you are. You are the decisions you make, and you can make new ones every day.
That is a great way to wrap this up. Nick, I very much appreciate your time. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, learned a lot. Um, and yeah, for those listening, if you, for whatever reason, have not come from Nick's stuff already, links will be in the description as always. And thank you guys for listening. We will see you guys next time. Peace.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the World XP podcast. If you want to watch another episode like this one, click there. If you want to subscribe, click there.